Good evening and welcome to Alaska TV Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. Thanks for joining us. You can find our forecasts anytime on the web at weather.gov/Alaska. And if you need a forecast by phone, you can get a recorded version at 1-800-472-0391. If you have any feedback for us, feel free to email us anytime at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. Taking a look at hazardous weather we're expecting over the next couple of days, we have a red flag warning in effect for the eastern Alaska range. That's going to be Isabel Pass north of Black Rapids. That's going to be in effect Thursday, that's tomorrow, from noon to 10 p.m. We're going to have low relative humidity as well as windy conditions, which is going to lead to the possible rapid spread of any fires that get started. So if you need to burn over the next couple of days, check with your local agencies before you do so. That's a potentially dangerous situation with that low relative humidity and high winds that can lead to rapid fire spread. Related, we also have a fire weather watch in effect for the Yukon Flats for Friday during the day. Also expecting warm temperatures leading to low relative humidity and breezy conditions in the Yukon Flats on Friday. So if that ends up panning out, they'll upgrade that to a red flag warning probably tomorrow for the Friday period, and that's going to be the same thing with possibly dangerous conditions as far as fire spread. Taking a look at our breakup map for the day, not a whole lot of change, but we are seeing some open area on some of the North Slope rivers. So breakup is just beginning for the North Slope, but it looks like it's probably going to be slow. So expect that to really occur over the next couple of weeks. Other than that, not a lot of change. We're still done for all of the rivers south of the Brooks Range. So really just keeping an eye on those North Slope rivers at this point. Taking a look at our satellite imagery today, we have low pressure spinning over the western Aleutians with a big front spreading into the YK Delta area and the Alaska Peninsula today. We can also see a little bit of a swirl along the northwest coast. That's another weak low pressure system. And we have fog across the North Slope today. As we just talked about, fog along the North Slope today, that's probably the big story as far as today goes. That's actually going to be some freezing fog as temperatures remain below freezing on the North Slope. So that can create some icy conditions with those little fog droplets freezing onto things and almost like freezing rain, but just finer droplets there. Expect that today and into tonight. With that low, that weak low that we have over the west coast, we've got a trough over the northwest coast of the state. That's kicking up the winds a little bit, so we do expect heavy freezing spray along the Chukchi Sea coast and into the Chukchi Sea for today and into tonight. So be aware of that if you're planning to head out into that area. For tonight, that low pressure system over the Aleutians continues to move a little bit towards the west and weaken just slightly. So we have a decaying occluded front that's going to be moving rain into the Alaska Peninsula and southwest portions of the state. Also some rain and showers associated with that weak low over the west coast. We'll see some fog development over the YK Delta and that continuing freezing fog over the North Slope. Also some fog development, particularly over the waters for the Panhandle. So keep an eye out for low visibilities and quick changing visibility in these areas where we're talking about fog for tonight. For Thursday, we are looking at a little bit of snow for the northwest coast with that trough that remains in the area. Other than that, showers for the western portion of the mainland, as well as stretching down into the Aleutian chain. We still have our low pressure system weakening in the Aleutians with that breaking up occluded front, and another weak low pressure system over the mainland with a trough stretching towards the east and some rain for maybe some higher portions of the southern panhandle on Thursday. For Friday, we have that weakening low spreading into the southern Alaska Peninsula. That's going to be bringing rain and showers continuing to the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Also showers continuing on and off for southwestern and western portions of the state. Some high pressure nosing up along the coast of the Panhandle and into the eastern portions, southeastern portions of the mainland a little bit, but we will see low pressure both north into the interior as well as south over the northern Gulf for Friday. So we will see continuing chances for rain in south central and even some of the higher terrain of the southern panhandle east of where that ridge of high pressure is starting to nose in. Looking at temperatures for Thursday morning, we've got our warmest temperatures over the western interior with lows expected to be in the mid 40s. Coldest for the North Slope, no surprise there, with temperatures in the low 20s, 20, 22 to even about 25 degrees for a low temperature on Thursday morning. For Thursday afternoon, rather warm temperatures across the interior, even getting up to some upper 60s near the Fairbanks area. Still below freezing for the North Slope. So again, be on the lookout for the potential for some freezing fog up there, and high temperatures in the 50s for the south central and southeast portions of the state. For Friday morning, not a ton of change from Thursday morning, so we still expect low to mid 40s for the interior of the state, a little bit warmer along the North Slope than Thursday morning, so low 20s to even maybe some upper 20s for lows on Friday morning. Low to mid 40s for the Panhandle as well as South Central, and upper 30s to around 40 with not a whole lot of change in the Aleutians. For Friday afternoon, we'll see the warmest temperatures of the week for the interior, and those places that we saw that fire weather watch in effect for the Yukon Flats. We're looking at temperatures between 70, possibly as warm as 80 degrees there. Still not as warm though as we head further south to South Central, where we're expecting temperatures in the mid 50s and upper 50s to mid 60s for the Panhandle. Still cold for the North Slope, below freezing, but could see a few temperatures right around freezing for that North Slope area on Friday afternoon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to aviation weather. For Thursday morning, we're looking at IFR conditions through the entire Aleutian chain as well as pretty much all of the Bering Sea, stretching up into the immediate coastal YK Delta as well as the western tip of the Seward Peninsula. Also IFR conditions expected in the North Slope, some in the northern Gulf, and a little bit stretching from Prince William Sound northward. Marginal conditions for the southern panhandle on Thursday morning, as well as the northwest coast and parts of the YK Delta. For Thursday afternoon, not a ton in the way of improvement, so IFR conditions still for the Aleutian chain as well as into the Bering Sea and the North Slope. IFR conditions developing actually on the south side of Kodiak Island. Marginal conditions sticking around for the Alaska Peninsula, the Bristol Bay coast, and most of South Central and the Kenai Peninsula. For Friday morning, we'll see IFR continuing for the North Slope as well as parts of the immediate west coast of the state and the coastal YK Delta, as well as the Aleutian chain and the Bering Sea. IFR conditions developing for the eastern side of the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and the eastern Kenai Peninsula on Friday morning. Only some improvement on Friday afternoon. Kodiak Island, mostly MVFR conditions Friday afternoon, as well as the Alaska Peninsula and down through the eastern Aleutians. IFR conditions, though, still for most of the Aleutians and through the Bering Sea, up through St. Lawrence Island and up to the immediate northwest coast, as well as the North Slope. Marginal conditions for the Panhandle, through the Gulf Coast and into the YK Delta for Friday afternoon. Pass conditions on Thursday, VFR expected at Anaktuvuk Pass as well as at Adigan Pass. MVFR conditions at both Lake Clark and Merrill Passes for Thursday. MVFR also at Rainy Pass, and MVFR in the morning for Windy Pass improving to VFR, but during those morning hours at Windy Pass, we will see some IFR conditions at the south entrance for Windy Pass. MVFR at Isabel Pass in the morning on Thursday, improving to VFR in the afternoon. VFR at Mentasta on Thursday. IFR in the morning at Tanita Pass, improving to VFR Thursday afternoon. And VFR at Portage Pass, but we will see some IFR along the eastern entrance in the morning. And actually that IFR near the eastern entrance is only going to improve to MVFR Thursday afternoon. So careful at that east entrance if you're headed through Portage Pass. VFR at both Chilkoot and White Passes expected on Thursday. Thursday morning freezing levels. We have warm air spreading even further north than we saw today for Thursday. So 4,000 to even 6,000 feet freezing levels all the way up to the North Slope, 8,000 feet stretching up into the southern Panhandle, and 2,000 feet for the western Aleutians. Taking a look at icing, we have considerable moderate above 8,000 feet, stretching from about the Bristol Bay coast through the northern Alaska Peninsula. That's again going to be above about 8,000 feet. Isolated moderate for the western half of the mainland above 7,000 feet, as well as the Aleutians above 6,000 feet, and the southern half of the Panhandle above 7,000 feet. Jet stream winds, we've got our low pressure just north of the Aleutians and our main jets south of the Aleutians, from about 115 to 135 knots south of the Aleutians. That's going to be out of the west. About 90 knots out of the west and southwest coming up into the Alaska Peninsula. About 70 knots on the north out of the south on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. Another small jet just off the Panhandle, about 90 to 100 knots out in the northwest. 9,000 foot winds on Thursday, that same low pressure system just north of the Aleutians, with those strongest winds just south of the Aleutians, 50 to 60 knots out of the west and southwest. Also about 40 to 45 knots out of the south for the western interior, about 20 knots out of the north for the Panhandle, and just 5 to 10 or maybe 15 knots for the eastern half of the mainland on Thursday. 3,000 foot winds. We'll see, again, our strongest winds south of the Aleutian chain, 45 to 50 knots out of the west. Also a peak of about 50 knots out of the southeast for the YK Delta, and 40 to 55 knots out of the southwest for the northern Gulf. Taking a look at turbulence, below 4,000 feet, considerable moderate for much of the YK Delta and stretching into Kodiak Island, and considerable moderate below 3,000 feet for much of the Aleutian chain.
Can be many miles long, from 1 to 100 feet high, traveling at 400 miles per hour. This ocean monster is known as a tsunami, and it can wreak havoc on coastal populations and landscapes. A tsunami is a series of ocean waves caused by any large and sudden disturbance of the sea surface. Tsunamis can be generated by landslides, volcanic eruptions, or even meteorite impacts in the ocean, but they are most often caused by an earthquake where there's a sudden displacement of the ocean floor. When that happens, there's a transfer of energy from the sea floor to the ocean, causing waves on the surface to radiate outward in all directions. In deep waters, these waves may not even be detectable. But when the tsunami enters shallower waters, the wave speed slows and its height increases. The water along the coast may recede noticeably. A large wall of turbulent water, called a bore, may also form. When the tsunami hits, it may come ashore like a fast-rising flood and strike with devastating force. The series of waves may continue for hours. The first one may not be the last or the largest. For your safety, know the potential warning signs of an incoming tsunami. A strong earthquake that causes difficulty standing. A rapid rise or fall of the water along the coast. A loud ocean roar. When you're in a coastal area, it's important to keep alert for messages from local officials, such as lifeguards, police, the U.S. Tsunami Warning Centers, and NOAA All Hazards Radio. If you find yourself in a location of a tsunami strike, here's what you need to do to stay safe. Keep calm. Walk or run to higher ground, 100 feet above sea level or 1 mile inland. Do not drive. Keep roads open for emergency vehicles. If you cannot move to higher ground, use the stairs to get to the 3rd floor or higher in a sturdy building. Follow all instructions from local officials and stay out of coastal areas until authorities issue an all clear. Tsunamis can strike any coastline in the world and can affect locations thousands of miles away from where they formed. They may be uncommon, but the devastation they cause makes them a deadly force in nature. For more information on tsunamis, go to the following sites.
Tsunami, a killer wave, speeding across the ocean at 400 miles an hour. It smashes into land, destroying everything in its path. Tsunamis do not have a season, but they can strike any coast at any time. If one forms close to the shore, the shaking of the earth and a loud roar may warn of its approach. But when a tsunami forms across the ocean, it can take hours to reach the shore, enough time to warn people to move to higher land. Over the past 20 years, NOAA has developed DART, a real-time monitoring system that provides data for forecasting tsunamis. The DART systems have been deployed in earthquake-prone areas throughout the ocean, including the Pacific and Indian basins. A DART system combines a surface buoy and a sensor on the ocean floor. This sensor detects changes in water pressure and seismic activity and transmits the data back to the surface. If these changes indicate a tsunami may form, the buoy signals an alert via satellite to the tsunami warning centers in Alaska and Hawaii. Back at the centers, scientists plug the data into pre-existing models. These models predict the height, the arrival time, and the coastal locations that the tsunami will hit. Watches and warnings are issued to the affected communities so preparations can begin. Today, 47 DART stations are positioned all around the world, ready to detect and warn coastal communities about the next potential tsunami. With the DART system and tsunami warning centers in place, we are now better prepared to predict a killer wave before it strikes.
December 26, 2004. What began as an undersea earthquake in the Indian Ocean ended as the most deadly tsunami in recorded history, with nearly 240,000 lives lost. This was a devastating wake-up call to coastal communities and tsunami research. Prior to this event, only 6 of NOAA's Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunami, or DART, buoys were in place. Scientists could only predict tsunami arrival times, not flood potential. And there was not a global tsunami warning system. Today, 10 years later, we can tell a different story. U.S. and international coastlines are far better prepared for such a catastrophe, thanks in large part to research and technology developed at the NOAA Center for Tsunami Research at Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory. NOAA's DART array is now complete, with 39 buoys operated by the National Weather Service's National Data Buoy Center. Along with 21 international buoys, this array can measure a tsunami wave as small as 1 centimeter in the open ocean and provide these data in real time to forecast when a tsunami may hit the coast and how much flooding there will be. NOAA scientists and engineers are currently testing the 4th-generation DART buoy that will be able to measure local tsunamis as well as distant ones. Flooding forecast models incorporate local topography and historical tsunami data in order to more accurately predict exactly how a tsunami might behave when it reaches shore. NOAA has 75 site-specific models that can provide high-resolution flooding forecasts for effective response and mitigation during a tsunami event. NOAA has gathered data from every tsunami since 2004 to improve its forecast models. Today, it operates the world's only real-time tsunami flooding forecast system using DART data to accurately compute flooding forecasts. The NOAA Tsunami Warning Centers make tsunami data available on the internet and issue advisories, watches, and warnings through the Emergency Alert System and via NOAA weather radios. While it is impossible to prevent a tsunami, we are now much better prepared to detect them and predict their paths and impacts, so those in coastal communities can take the steps necessary to safely protect themselves.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for a look at the marine forecast. Starting out with the ice edge, we're seeing that shore-fast ice in Norton Sound breaking up quite a bit. In fact, we're seeing more open water in Norton Sound today than we did yesterday, and expect that trend to continue throughout the rest of this week. Taking a look at the marine forecast for southeast, winds over the Gulf 10 to 20 knots, generally out of the west and northwest, and 5 to 15 knots out of the south, generally for the inside waterways for Thursday. 6 to 8 foot seas for the Gulf and about 2 to 3 feet for those inside waters. For the Gulf on Friday, we'll see winds come up a bit out of the south, 20 to 25 knots. Winds coming up also just a little bit over those inside waters out of the south, 10 to 15 knots. Seas 7 to 8 feet for the Gulf and about 2 to 3 feet for the inside waters on Friday. For South Central on Thursday, we've got 10 knots of wind out of the southeast for the North Gulf, increasing as we head southwest towards the Barren Islands to 30 knots out of the east. That's also where we'll see our highest seas of about 8 to 11 feet. Elsewhere in the Gulf, around 5 to 6 foot seas and about 3 to 4 feet in Cook Inlet on Thursday. Winds coming up for most of the Gulf just a little bit on Friday to a consistent 25 knots out of the east and southeast, about 15 knots out of the east for Prince William Sound, and 15 to 20 knots out of the north and northeast for Cook Inlet on Friday. Seas coming up a bit as well over the Gulf, 8 to 12 feet, 3 to 5 feet for Cook Inlet. Taking a look at the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Thursday, 20 to 25 knot winds along the Gulf side out of the south and southeast, 20 to 30 knots out of the south and southeast for the north side of the peninsula. We'll see our highest seas on the Gulf side, 10 to 12 feet, and about 5 to 6 feet on the north side of the peninsula. For Friday, winds actually coming down just a little bit, about 15 knots near Kodiak Island, 20 to 25 knots elsewhere out of the east and southeast still. Seas 9 to 11 feet on the Gulf side and 4 to 5 feet on the Bering Sea side. For the Aleutian chain on Thursday, winds 25 to 30 knots for the eastern Aleutians out of the south, and about 25 to 30 knots for the western Aleutians as well. That's going to be out of the northwest and west. But between about Adak and Atka, we'll see a little bit of lighter winds, 15 to 20 knots out of the west and southwest. Strongest seas, as usual, on the Gulf side in that 15 to 17 foot range, 6 to 9 feet on the Bering Sea side. For Friday, winds coming down pretty much across the board a bit, 15 to 20 knots for the eastern Aleutians and 25 knots for the western Aleutians. Seas also coming down some 6 to 10 feet across the board. For the west coast on Thursday, we'll see winds generally 20 to 25 knots out of the east and northeast, but some southeasterly flow as we head south into the Bering Sea, especially near the Pribilovs, about 15 knots out of the southeast there. Outside of the ice cover, seas generally 5 to 10 feet, with those highest seas out in the open Bering on Thursday. For Friday, winds coming down just a little bit, still out of the east and northeast, about 15 to 25 knots. And seas also coming down a little bit, 5 to 7 feet in the open Bering and about 3 feet in that ice-free area in Norton Sound. For the Arctic coast on Thursday, due east winds for the North Slope as well as the Chukchi Sea coast, 15 to 25 knots, 10 to 15 knots off the west coast out of the north and northeast, and we'll see seas in the 2 to 5 foot range outside of that ice cover. For Friday, still due east winds for the North Slope and Chukchi Sea, 20 to 25 knots, 15 knots out of the east for the Chukchi Sea, and seas in the 2 to 3 foot range. For tonight, we are looking at heavy freezing spray for the Chukchi Sea, as well as freezing fog for the North Slope. So those are our big action areas for tonight. Be aware of those things if you are going to be in those areas. For Thursday, we'll see red flag conditions in the eastern Alaska range. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.